Good morning, guys. Welcome back. Today we're going to look at the 1852 definition of corporation. We're going to trace the definition up to the modern time and discuss how it has affected our society. So let's begin with 1852. A corporation is a body politic or corporate, formed and authorized by law to act as a single person. A society having the capacity of transacting business as an individual. Corporations are aggregate or sole. There's two kinds. Corporations aggregate consist of two or more persons united in a society, which is preserved by a succession of members, either forever, or till the corporation is dissolved by the power that formed it, or by the death of all its members, or by surrender of its charter or franchises, or by forfeiture. Such corporations are the mayor and aldermen of cities, the head and fellows of a college, the dean and chapter of a cathedral church, the stockholders of a bank or insurance company, etc. A corporation's sole consists of one person only and his successors as a king or a bishop. Now, let's look next at a quick reading from right after the Civil War. So we're going from 1852 to 1866, I believe. And this was written by Charles Francis Adams, who I believe is the descendant of John Adams. And John Adams was one of the founders of the anti-Masonic Party. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Listen to this. One leading feature of these developments, however, is, from its political aspect, especially worthy of the attention of the American people. Modern society has created a class of artificial beings who bid fair soon to be the masters of their creator. What does he mean, artificial beings? Well, he's talking about the corporation, right? The corporation aggregate consists of two or more persons, and the corporation sole consists of one person. So this is where we get the idea of a straw man from, right? Let's continue. It is but a very few years since the existence of a corporation controlling a few millions of dollars was regarded as a subject of grave apprehension. And now, this country already contains single organizations which wield a power represented by hundreds of millions of dollars. So he's saying, around the time of the Civil War, the public was very apprehensive of these corporations. And why would they be? Well, because corporations are granted the rights of an individual, okay? And why that is scary is because corporations don't have morality. They don't have a soul, S-O-U-L, right? Interesting how they use words like soul in the definition, S-O-L-E. All these words are interconnected, right? So if a corporation doesn't have a soul, it makes it a lot easier to do unmoral things, right? Makes it a lot easier to have your employees work like slaves, to only give them enough money to barely survive. And we feel the effects of this today, don't we? Right. Let's continue with this reading. These bodies are the creatures of single states, but in New York, in Pennsylvania, in Maryland, in New Jersey, and not in those states alone, they are already establishing despotisms, which no spasmodic popular effort will be able to shake off. So right after the Civil War, Mr. Adams here is saying that these corporations are springing up everywhere. And he mentions the Union states, really, like New York and Pennsylvania. And he's saying that no popular effort will be able to shake it off because by nature, these corporations are extremely powerful. And like I said, they don't answer to morality. They are very cutthroat. Let's continue. Everywhere and at all times, however, they illustrate the truth of the old maxim of the common law, that corporations have no souls, S-O-U-L-S. Only in New York has any intimation yet been given of what the future may have in store for us should these great powers become mere tools in the hands of ambitious, reckless men. Right? So, quick pause. If somebody in our society came out and created a massive business and said, I'm going to treat my employees this way, I'm going to pay them barely enough to survive. I'm going to make them work 12 hours a day in terrible conditions, etc. Do you think the people would allow that person to do that? No, they wouldn't. They would be able to confront that person on a moral level. They would be able to turn society against that person's idea, right? It's different when you give these same human rights to an invisible entity like a corporation. What does a corporation answer to? What does it answer to in terms of morality? It doesn't answer to anyone because it's not real. It's just an idea on paper. So when that falls in the hands of ambitious, reckless men, it's not good. And that's certainly what happened. We'll get into it. Let's continue. The system of corporate life and corporate power, as applied to industrial development, is yet in its infancy. It tends always to development, always to consolidation. It is ever grasping new powers, or insidiously exercising covert influence. Yeah, does that sound familiar? All this stuff is going on today, and it began a long time ago. Even now, the system threatens the central government. I think we'll stop there with this reading, but even now, the system threatens the central government. Remember, our first definition was from 1852, right? The reading is from 1866. And now let's take a look at the Act of 1871. So we have 1852, Civil War, warning of corporations after the Civil War, and then just a few years later, we have the Act of 1871, which states, an act to provide a government for the District of Columbia. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled, that all that part of the territory of the United States included within the limits of the District of Columbia be, and the same is hereby, created into a government by the name of the District of Columbia, by which name it is hereby constituted a body corporate for municipal purposes, and may contract and be contracted with, sue and be sued, plead and be impleaded, have a seal, and exercise all other powers of a municipal corporation, not inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States and the provisions of this Act. So in 1871, they took the District of Columbia and incorporated it. Let's go back to our definition. Now keep in mind the District of Columbia. Corporation is a body politic formed and authorized by law to act as a single person. Red flag, right? So now the District of Columbia has the ability legally to act as a single person. Does that sound like it jives with a constitutional republic or a democracy, right? Absolutely not. A society having the capacity of transacting business as an individual. So now we have the so-called representative government of the United States really doing business as an individual. Not good. And let's go down to the corporations, let's keep reading. Corporations are aggregate or sole. Aggregate consists of two or more persons united in a society, which is preserved by a succession of members. Okay, it goes on to give examples of what corporations are, and it says, mayor and aldermen of cities, head and fellows of a college, the dean and chapter of cathedrals, the stockholders of a bank or insurance company. Who would you say is really in control of our country today, 2021? Bankers, 501c3 churches, colleges, aldermans, mayors, you know the deal, right? So this is a blatant, obvious example of how the ruling class has established a method of total control over us without us even knowing it, right? When they say the head and fellows of a college, the deans of cathedrals and stockholders of a bank or insurance company, what comes to mind? Freemasons, right? Societies that are secret, right? And it says right at the top here, corporation is a society having the capacity of transacting business as an individual. So we have, for example, Society of Freemasonry, which is made up of all these ruling class entities acting as an individual and transacting business as an individual. I know this might be a little confusing, but you throw in the Act of 1871 and the incorporation of Washington, D.C., now we have a group, let's say Freemasonry, controlling Washington, D.C., in which they are able to act as an individual, separate from the people of the country, okay? Isn't that crazy, right? And it gets crazier because we are all unwillingly a part of this, and this is what a lot of truthers talk about, and I'm going to try to explain it the best I can. So on paper, they made Washington, D.C. a corporation, which can act and transact business as an individual, right? So on top of that, they created a body corporate for every American citizen. If you have a birth certificate and a social security number, there is also an invisible you on paper, right? And in the real world, we think our government is functioning by voting, by town meetings, by having, people think we actually have a say, but that's not true. The District of Columbia is acting as an individual, transacting business. What else does it say down here? Suing and being sued, having a seal, and exercising all other powers of a municipal corporation. Washington, D.C. is doing that by itself, without the people. It is acting as an individual. And without knowing it, when we get our social security numbers, we are creating a body corporate for ourselves under the power and jurisdiction of the corporation of Washington, D.C. This is what the shadow government is. This is what your straw man is, right? That is why, no matter how much we try, nothing seems to go the people's way, and everything seems to go the way of the ruling class, especially today. It's disgusting, right? I think I explained that. If you have questions, put them down below, and I'll be happy to answer them, because this is such a confusing thing. That's the best way we can get to the bottom of it, is by discussing it. Now, let's fast forward to 1971, so 100 years after DC is incorporated, and let's read the definition of corporation. A body of persons granted a charter legally recognizing them as a separate entity having its own rights, privileges, and liabilities distinct from those of its members. Let's put that in context, right? So the Corporation of Washington, D.C. is a body of persons granted a charter legally recognizing them as a separate entity. Does it sound like anybody wanted that to happen? No, this was snuck in after they genocided half the country and burned it to the ground, right? So the District of Columbia has been granted a charter legally recognizing them as a separate entity having its own rights, privileges, and liabilities distinct from those of its members. Wow. And that is proved right here with the Act of 1871, where it plainly states what we just read. Okay? Then it goes on to say, 2. Such a body created for purposes of government. 3. Any group of people combined into or acting as one body. So a very different definition than in 1852, right? In 1852, they tell us the truth, pretty much. They tell us that churches and banks, insurance companies, fellows of a college, societies like the Freemasons, aldermen and mayors of cities, they tell us that all of these function as corporations, as individual entities, right? And then fast forward 120 years later, they don't tell you that, of course. And it's interesting that Charles Francis Adams warned us about all of this before the Act of 1871 came out. Remember, he said, let's see, only in New York has any intimation yet been given of what the future may have in store for us, should these great powers become mere tools in the hands of ambitious, reckless men. The system of corporate life and corporate power, as applied to industrial development, is yet in its infancy. It tends always to development, always to consolidation. It is ever grasping new powers, or insidiously exercising covert influence. Even now, the system threatens the central government. Talk about foreshadowing, right? It's exactly what would happen a couple years after this. Let's look at the modern definition real quick. So dictionary.com, a corporation is an association of individuals created by law or under authority of law, having a continuous existence independent of the existences of its members, and powers and liabilities distinct from those of its members. So just a really ho-hum, bland explanation, right? It doesn't lead you to critically think about it at all, like the 1852 definition did, right? It's just a intentionally vague and boring definition. So I guess to sum this up, we do have inalienable rights under the Constitution, right? But whenever you interact with the government, it's not your physical person interacting with the government. It's your body corporate. It is the invisible corporation they have created for you via your social security number, via your birth certificate, driver's license, etc. So we only have the illusion of controlling our society. In reality, we elect all these people, allegedly, and we think we have a representative government. But in Washington, D.C., they're not working at all for our real people, our real persons. They deal entirely with the body corporate or the straw man that's been created for you. And this is provable with stuff like Black's Law Dictionary. You know, if you go and study Latin and you have a million hours in the day to read up on this, you'll find out it's true. And one of the more disturbing aspects of this is the Federal Reserve Bank, which is a Rothschild-controlled bank, like most of them are throughout the world. They are the ones responsible for our economy. So the Rothschild Bank, the Federal Reserve, is not part of our government. It loans money with interest to the United States government. The government it loans money to is the incorporated government of Washington, D.C. So, with that being said, if they're loaning money to Washington, D.C. with interest, who pays that interest? For example, say they give $1 to the Corporation of D.C. with 5% interest. Where does that 5 cents come from? It can't come from the Federal Reserve, and it can't come from thin air. Well, that interest is backed by the body corporate of each individual in our country. Let me explain that a little bit. So the Federal Reserve expects collateral for the money it pumps in to the United States economy. That collateral is the body corporate of you and I, the individual, the worker, okay? So we are the collateral against the Federal Reserve's money. The work we do every day, the taxes we pay, is all sent back to the Federal Reserve, right? Because the Federal Reserve demands their interest back from the incorporated government of D.C. So in reality, it's not the work we do, it's not the physical labor, it is our body corporate is the collateral. So we literally are slaves to the Federal Reserve through a shadow government that nobody knows about. I hope that makes sense. I've done videos on this many a times, but now with the 1852 definition, I think it makes a little bit more sense. I guess we'll close by reading it one more time, and we'll, stop and explain things. A corporation is a body politic or corporate formed and authorized by law to act as a single person. So in 1871, this is exactly what they did. They created Washington, D.C. as a body corporate to function as one individual. Even though we allegedly have a Senate and a House of Representatives and we have a constitutional republic, not anymore. 1871, all of that was turned into a body corporate functioning as one individual through the District of Columbia Incorporated. Let's go back real quick. Corporations are aggregate or sole. Corporations aggregate consist of two or more persons united in a society, which is preserved by a succession of members, either forever or till the corporation is dissolved. So when we talk about DC being incorporated, it consists of two or more persons united in a society, which is preserved by a succession of members. It's not preserved by voting. It's preserved by a succession of members which they choose. That might be hard to grasp, but it is the absolute truth. Our votes are not worth anything anymore, and they haven't been for a long time. So these societies in and around Washington, D.C., they are the ones choosing the succession of representatives and political figures, right? That's why our elections, like, you know the deal, the 2020 election, what a joke. Not just the presidency, but also all the representatives. And this is why every senator and representative is a backstabbing liar, because they've been picked by groups like Freemasons to be in place for the succession of members of the incorporated Washington, D.C. Man, crazy. Such corporations are the mayor and aldermen of cities, the head and fellows of a college, the dean and chapter of cathedral churches, the stockholders of a bank or insurance company. And we know very well that all those listed institutions are made up of Freemasons. It's very obvious, right? Not just Freemasons. There's other groups, like the churches have the Knights of Malta, the Knights of St. John of Jerusalem, the Templars, right? The colleges have everything from Skull and Bones to the Boule Society and all the fraternities. What else did they say? Stockholders of a bank or insurance company. Like the episode we did the other day, they have trust and holding companies. And of course, aldermen, mayors, representatives, even the president, they are all interconnected by groups like Freemasonry, Knights Templars, you know the deal. So really, we don't have any power. Not only do we not have any power, but we are collateral for the debt of the United States of America. That's what keeps the fiat currency alive. Having children and being forced to work like we do. That is what keeps the whole system alive. So never forget, in 1871, Washington, D.C. was turned into a corporation, and we all were given body corporate straw men, whether we know it or not. And if you want to get more educated on this, look up William Blackstone and Black's Law Dictionary. Because the real language of the laws that control us, it is so different than what we are taught and what we know in the real world. When we're talking about body corporates and straw men, there is a whole different legislature on it. There is a whole different language about all of it, right? So we don't even know, we haven't even scratched into it about the real truth of what the government is and how they view us and what they consider us. Hope that made sense. I want to leave you guys with this real quick. This is from the Bible, the Masonic Bible that I have, and it's the question and answer section. Listen to this. Question: presidents? And it says, name the two candidates for president and vice president of the United States on the anti-Masonic ticket in 1831. Answer: William Wirt and Amos L. Maker. How crazy is that? Why would a Bible have this information in it? Well, it's because the Freemasons indoctrinate their members into believing that normal people are the enemy, right? Anti-Masonic ticket. Did you know that there was an anti-Masonic party in America? It was the first third party, and it was huge. It swept the country. But by 1831, it was too late. Things were already corrupt enough. It wasn't incorporated, the government, yet, but they had enough people in place to defeat the anti-Masonic ticket in 1831. Now, bear with me for a sec. I think I have some documents that you guys might find pretty amazing. Let's see. Check this out. This is from 1830, the state of New York. Proceedings of the Anti-Masonic Convention for the state of New York, held at Utica, August 11th, 1830. Let's read a little bit of it. Excuse me. Of the New York State Anti-Masonic Convention. a convention of delegates from the several counties of the state of New York convened at the Supreme Court room in Utica on the 11th day of August, 1830. The convention was called to order by the Honorable James Geddes of the county of Onondaga, on whose motion the convention proceeded to the choice of its officers. We'll skip down a little bit, it's just naming all the officers. Look how involved everybody was, though. Incredible. A little bit more. Let's see. You know what? Resolutions. There we go. Okay. Whereas the objects, principles, and motives of the anti-Masonic Republican Party have been grossly misrepresented by selfish and designing politicians who fear a loss of their power in the reform which that party is endeavoring to effect. And whereas such has been the influence of Freemasonry that it has to a great extent controlled the press and thereby has been able to mislead and deceive large portions of the public, or of the people. And whereas it is the right and duty of every party explicitly to state the objects it proposes and the principles it adopts in relation to the affairs of government. You guys hear that? This is 1830. What is it, 2021? This is the exact same thing was happening in 1830. All because of Freemasonry. It says Freemasonry has been able to mislead and deceive large portions of the people through the media. Does that not sound exactly like what's going on today? Okay, continuing. Resolved that the anti-Masonic Republican Party is opposed to the existence among this people of all secret societies. Remember what the 1852 definition tells us, right? Tells us that a corporation is a society, right? Freemasonry is a society. Okay, opposed to all secret societies, which by possibility may endanger the public peace. Listen to this. Endanger the public peace. What's going on today? We got Black Lives Matter. We got protests for the New World Order. We got no peace. Continuing. Subsidize the public press. That's certainly the most obvious one going on today. There is zero truth in the media. I can't even watch Project Veritas and think that it's 100% true. You know what I mean? It's just the reality. There is no true media because groups like Freemasonry control everything. If something's going to be circulated to millions of people, it's only circulated because the Masons allow it, and the other groups, other societies that control our country allow it. Very little organic information arrives on the phones or computers or newspapers of the American public. Goes on to say, corrupt the legislative. So we definitely know our legislation is corrupt, right? The types of bills they've been passing, whether it's a $1 trillion infrastructure deal or I saw one opinion. I mean, this isn't legislative, but I saw an opinion from the Supreme Court that said, we got to do an episode on it. It said that anybody who's taken these SHOTs has changed their genome and is now property of the patent holder. We'll get into that. That's what they're doing right now, the legislative and the other branches of our government. Goes on to say, overawe the executive, right? So the executive branch right now is just literally the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. Every single one of them, I'm sure, is a member of one or two of these groups. Goes on to say, or obstruct the judicial department of the government. How obvious is that? That's exactly what's happening today. They don't even care about the rigged election. It's pathetic, dude. Continuing. That the Society of Freemasons, holding its meetings in secret, owing its perpetuity to oaths of mutual affiliation, coextensive with the limits of the nation, and yet capable of concentrating its power at any and all points of this union, is by reason of its very organization liable to be perverted to purposes inconsistent with the public safety and welfare. That in the events which called the party into existence, we have proof, P-R-O-O-F, we have proof that the Society of Freemasons has broken the public peace and with a high hand deprived the state of a citizen. 1830, you guys. and with a high hand deprive the state of a citizen. That in the guarded and studious silence of the press throughout this Union on the subject of that outrage, we have proof that Freemasonry has subsidized the public press. That in the refusal of the House Assembly to institute a legislative inquiry into the acts of the Society of Masons, in relation to that outrage, we have proof that the legislative department has been corrupted. That in the withholding by the acting governor of all positive aid in bringing to justice the actors in that profligate conspiracy, and in his recent denunciation of the same public feeling, which when a judge he hailed as, quote, a pledge that our rights and liberties are destined to endure, end quote, we have proof that Freemasonry has made a timid executive subservient to her will, and that in the escape of the guilty conspirators by means of the Masonic obligation of witnesses and jurors, we have fearful proof that Freemasonry has obstructed, defeated, and baffled the judiciary in the high exercise of its powers. 1830. Unbelievable. This can be found online for free. You can download it. Anti-Masonic Convention. It's also a very good one from Massachusetts, I think from the year 1828. And, man, with all this knowledge, get out of the cities and just prepare for the worst and keep your faith in Jesus Christ. If you don't believe that Christianity is a truth, you need to study Freemasonry. That's what brought me to the truth, was studying what these demons believe, right? Once you figure out the secrets of Freemasonry, it opens a lot of things up and you realize, wow, there's something about the Bible that I should take interest in. So bless you all in the name of Jesus. I hope you have a great day. Thank you.